So, like, how do you think the so as Thomas phrases it, the Nuremberg regime, which is just geniusly put. I have this perspective that I think um, it's gonna move into like this materialistic race realism that's like it's truer than what people have now. I think people are becoming against their will more racially conscious, specifically white people, which hasn't happened in 80 plus years, and it's being done in a more intelligent way than just um like sort of a soft like Southern pride type deal. Um, it's become like the locus of kind of the young new right, and I'm kind of curious because you do bring it up on your podcast a lot, and I have my criticisms of that point of view, even though I do think there's a lot of truth to it. Do you think that there is like this, like we are just crashing into this new foundational narrative of like the race realist?
Yeah,
Or
for the longest time, I think there's been a lot of very knowledgeable and highly intelligent people on this thing of ours we might call the dissident right. In terms of race realism, you can go back to Jared Taylor. You can go back to like all these great thinkers. Even Ron Unz is probably on that side as well. But what's interesting is that for a lot of people on the right broadly, especially conservatives, the the trend towards racial identitarianism has been noticed by all, but I think the conversation's actually been led by the left for the most part. And
yeah,
oftentimes, white guys find themselves playing catch up. Like it was first permissible to discuss, like even in Canada, for example, where I live, we have in our body of law the idea of like we basically have ethno states in Canada in the form of the Aboriginal tribal bands, where you
yeah,
can literally do blood tests to figure out if you're Aboriginal. And then there's been stories of people who've been exiled for race mixing. And when it comes to those narratives, we've already accepted their belief of blood memory, that not only does racial genetics exist, but it can carry this sort of racial spirit with them. So, but that stuff is allowed. And I find that whites especially have noticed every other group is permitted to talk about this, and we oftentimes, speaking as a white guy, find ourselves adopting their narratives. So what the conservatives were doing for a long time, and arguably the alt-light, if people remember that, that would have been, I'm not trying to throw them under the bus, but like the Gavin McInnes types, which are like, this group says they're persecuted and oppressed. Well, everyone's persecuted and oppressed. Well, right there, you've accepted the narrative that you want to be persecuted and oppressed to be allowed to play the game. Long story short, I think that white people, while they're watching everyone else kind of follow their own ethnic or group based sovereignty, they don't really have the tools to define it for themselves. And this is something we've talked about a lot recently. We actually don't know how to argue for our own self-interest. We very frequently will try and find allies from other groups who we think will like side with us, or we try and adopt their talking points. See, oh no, we're just like them. We're just see, why can't we play too? And I
mhm,
think our inability to actually advocate for, because we are different psychologically, we're different culturally, and the idea of trying to argue that you're oppressed does not come naturally to a lot of people of European stock. It just seems kind of in a lot of different ways. And so it is true. I think there's a not only is there a swing towards acceptance of identitarianism, and this is correlated with an increasingly multicultural society. Consider this, by the time that whites are allowed to play that game and engage in that conversation, it will be when they are a minority, when they have the least amount of sovereignty, and they will be most subject to this new system. At which point, when we're allowed to play the game on their terms,
mhm.
they will have the power to persecute us even more. And then we won't even have the numbers to advocate for ourselves. And that might sound a bit extreme, but you're also seeing one thing that we talked about on the show. There's this book by Marco Papik called Geopolitical Alpha. It's an economics book, and he was tracking the again, another pendulum swing from laissez-faire capitalism that kind of rose from the 70s and 80s under Thatcher and whatnot to this wider acceptance of socialist policies. So the idea of having like your own sovereign area, that's out of fashion. And you see this on the right too. You see the acceptance of more nationalist and socialist policies. There's like, we laugh at libertarians, we scoff at the free market stuff. So it seems that the game being played by everyone going forward is going to be this pushing of sort of collectivist socialist policies. And, not to say that's right or wrong. That's not a value judgment. That just seems to be like, if I were betting on what would happen, Tucker Carlson's a good example of that. The rise of Tucker Carlson, he's advocating things that were completely alien to the Republican Party, just even 5 years ago. He's advocating for government intervention, more socialist systems and policies. So there is, but like I said before, I think whites are the last to the party on that. And that's why I don't think that's the whole thing we say about conservatives generally. They're like 5 years too late on everything. By the time, in 5 years, they're finally going to be pushing for transgender acceptance as everyone else is getting out of that. Like, it's just going to be late on everything. Anyway, that's a very meandering answer to your question.
I think though, it's the white thing. I think it falls on deaf ears, and then people on the right, white guys, are like, oh yeah, see what happens when we try to play the game like they do, we get scoffed at. That's why the white man truly is, he's the lowest rung in the game right now. But I think it's because have you read or the short story? I know, but George Orwell wrote was it Killing an Elephant, Shooting an Elephant?
No, I haven't read that. They're going to be like, there's this little book. You might have heard of it. 1984.
1984. Have you heard of that one? Wow. We totally, no, yeah. The point he makes in it is when the white man goes tyrant, it's his own freedom he destroys. It's really cool. It's a good little story about him being when he was a military officer in Myanmar, and how like he had to go chase down this elephant. And when he finally got to it, he's like, the elephant was fine. It wasn't rampaging anymore. All they had to go do is get the person who trains it and takes care of it, and it would have been fine. But he has like 5,000 of these brown faces surrounding him, and he's like, well, the white man has to put on a show. I got to be their little puppet. And that's kind of like all the white man is doing when he plays that game. So that's one thing. But then the other thing is just, if you keep going this direction, this is like my biggest concern with Keith Woods, because I think Keith Woods is like, there's something about him. He's got that glimmer in his eye. I just love him. But the thing is he is just a Neoplatonist. If you get down to the foundational aspects of these nationalist movements, they don't have any life to them. They look a lot like a black nationalist movement. Like, a black nationalist movement doesn't have a real like Western philosophical basis. It wants to operate on a lower level. It wants to operate on that, and forget, I'm not being racist here, just the animalistic racial level. And when you go onto the level of just race, you're leaving out like the entirety of the last 2,500 years of Western philosophy, specifically Christianity. And it's like, that's why we won. That's why we're great. And that's why a multicultural society, in some sense, can exist, because it's built on that. But all I see with the right is like fiddle fucking around with all of these labels, and all they can define themselves on is like, yeah, democracy isn't real, and white people are seemingly persecuted. But it's like, I mean, I guess it's just, what you have to replace it is like a ghost dance to like an era that you think is better. Like we were talking about before the show, like these millennials, well, so a lot of them will LARP as Amish. Like, I even went through that phase, like I went through that phase where like, oh, we need a return. But you did a little show on Penty Linkola. Cool guy. Same with Chad Haig. I actually had the book around here. But a lot of guys like that, who are focused on like, your culture is your ecology. You can't avoid ecology. That's the basis of who you are. And if you're a nationalist movement, you're like living in this lie that we can like especially for white America. Like, where is white America? There's like, obviously whites are like, they are a bad guy in some way, but for the most part, they lack the universal distinction as a culture in America that matters to be like, look at us, we need to restore order. You have to have first principles. And anytime I see people talking about the right wing, like how we're going to take things back and it's going to get greater in some way, they always forget, like, Christian will always be like a little auxiliary thing. Like, it's one of the many labels they have. And it's like, all right, but when you do win, it's going to be like, okay, so what is the white answer if it's not like first Christian, and like very much so, and then like 2,500 years of metaphysics, like political philosophy. And you said this too, you and Judas, it's built on, everything else comes before political philosophy, everything else comes before economics, but that's where everyone starts rather than metaphysics. And I just don't know where does that come in at this point. That's my long-winded criticism of this, like,
No,
of
yeah,
the Wignat thing.
That's
like,
a
I'm
fair
not entirely
point.
against it. I'm not like Gurr. It's just I don't see fruit with it.
Yeah, I'll start by saying that a lot of these groups, we have more common than we have in difference. And it's pretty frequent that on the dissident right, I use dissident right very, very broadly, but we'll agree on most things, but we start wars over the couple disagreements. And there's some serious disagreements. And I've been vocal about certain creators that I vehemently disagree with, or even think their ideas are subversive and dangerous if taken to their extreme. But a lot of people, one thing that we discussed frequently on the show is how revolutions actually, how they behave, especially the American Revolution. I think we were discussing the book, The Square and the Tower. And there's this myth that any large social change or any huge movement needs to be homogenous, when in fact it's usually like 5 to 7 smaller groups that don't even particularly like each other and disagree on a lot of points, but they are given this one momentum through a few key individuals who can kind of unite them to take down an opponent or an enemy. That's usually how it happens. So I think, I'm not trying to just point to Trump when I say this, but because the election of Trump still weighs heavy on the minds of a lot of people on the right, because that's the last time we seem to have done something cool that shouldn't have happened. There's like that, the Trump election wasn't supposed to happen, and it did, because of a lot of these groups working in concert for like the first time in a long time. But things like that are possible within systems, and they're short-lived. But they're supposed to be short-lived, as long as you have like one shared enemy or one shared goal. I think the ligaments in the tissue between a lot of these groups right now who disagree, because I'm very open that I think, at least in the short to midterm, pagans, Christians of various denominations, the Christian denominations already don't like each other a lot of the time. They can find a lot of commonality in simply just survival at this point. And I think an interesting phenomena that I've seen in the news is even the liberals are starting, we call them the libs around here, but the libs are starting to notice. The problem is when the libs notice something, it's almost too late. Like, you're seeing liberals complain about things that we were complaining about 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, because it's just become that ignorable. So we're not crazy. These things are happening, obviously. But I think that means that more people than I think people give credit for are on the same page about these things. It's just what we do about it. Do we work within the system? How do you stop mass migration? And that's kind of what we're debating right now. And I don't think most debates on the dissident right are cause for alarm, because I think we're trying to take a pretty big bite out of existence right now. There's a lot of very interesting debates happening, especially within Christianity. Look, I've had guys like Ryan Turnipseed on, who can give us insight into what's going on in the Lutheran Church right now. Yeah, in every area, there's some really big swings being taken. On the topic of ethnogenesis, just to circle back to your first point, like, on one hand, we understand that white people only seem to be the ones on the earth that don't know what white people means. So I would say to a lot of these people, like, what even is white? And we're Italian. I'm like, well, you have a general sense, and there are gradations there. But I'm like, if you take an Irish guy and a French guy and put them in a bar in the Sudan, you're both the white guys at that bar. Everyone there knows it. Asian people know what white guy is. So at that level, we need to understand that this is the game being played, and you don't get to opt out of that game. even if you don't, and this is kind of where conservatives go, like, I don't even believe in white people. Well, the world does. So what are you going to do about that? So, and we could have debates about who
Yeah.
falls in that category, but that doesn't interest me as much, other than we all kind of know that there's a core, maybe like Anglos and Scandinavians are at the center. That's the big debate. Who gives a shit? But this, and that's where we spend all of our time. Like, no. Let's just figure out that white people exist, and that certain groups think you either simultaneously don't exist and then also should be destroyed. So it's a survival thing right now. And I think the fact that liberals seem to understand that's a survival thing means that we're not crazy. We're not wasting our time talking about this, but we need to figure out, like, here's the problem I run into. And I think a lot of white guys who they would rather not count themselves as far right. I said this all the time. I don't want to be doing this in a society that made any sense. I'd be a wandering poet and I would be broke as shit. I shouldn't be making a podcast. No one should be listening to me. But the fact that most of us have to care about this means that they are aware that even if they don't want to be on this side politically, they understand that, when you talk about things like this, half of all white people disagree with you. So even like this is kind of what you were getting to, like, oh, even just using white as an identifier. Well, most of the people trying to persecute you right now are like white liberals. Or if you've ever encountered this with your family, right?
Yeah.
Your family disowns you because of these beliefs. That's a hard pill to swallow. And that's not easy to talk about. Unless you've gone through that, it's life destroying. So you have to reconcile it. Okay. And the guys who I'm most interested in are the ones going to the drafting table and saying, okay, what the fuck are we doing in a 21st century sense? And you sort of touched on a big issue that I think we have on the right, which is we keep using 20th century language, 20th century models. We keep looking back to the revolutions of the 20th century. There's still guys talking about the working class of the world, workers of the world unite. Like that that is not evocative to a 21st century mind. Just like old identities might need to be reframed in the 21st century. Like the things that went without saying in 1950s America don't go without saying anymore, and people are unmoored and lost. So to even talk to another quote unquote white person on these grounds, like, you need to frame things differently for them. And though the people I'm most interested in are the ones trying to have that conversation, and first of all trying to say you're allowed to act within your self-interest, but then what even are your self-interests? A lot of people don't know. And that's where a lot of the fights and confusion come from. So we're on the distant right. A lot of us, the reason it seems so chaotic over here is because we've drilled right down to the bedrock on a lot of these issues and have had to rethink everything, especially generationally. I'm sure we'll get to this in a second, but a lot of young guys, I'll use myself as an example. I'm the first guy in my entire like 5 generations, not 5, let's say 4 generations that's owned a gun. They're not gun people. I like guns. We're the ones who actually want to do the trad thing, and let's have like a multi-generational house. But no one in my family has done that. Point being that there's a lot of young men who want to grab onto that sort of sovereignty, but they're the first ones in their entire family that have ever thought like this. So they need to come up with a new schematic on how to do it. Some guys, I know a few guys. There's a guy I like by the name of Black Horse. You probably know him. Like, he's got land in his family and whatnot. He'll talk about that a lot. But a lot of people, they don't have any fucking land. I come from a family of bureaucrats and shit, like white collar people. The fact that I'm trying to, I want to build a house. I have to find those tools myself. And so do a lot of young people. So it's a lot of pressure put on individuals who don't even really have a social network yet, or we're trying to figure that out. So that's why I empathize with people who are like even going down this road.
It's a huge fucking, I'm too dumb for this, but emergence and imminence. I have a good friend who's way smarter than me who explained it, and I was just whoa. But I think like autists, common thing with white DR. Again, I use that term as well broadly, and I don't try to define it, but their issue is like well, where do we start? How do we do it? What happens? Blah 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 blah. But it's like it's already happening. So like for me, I bought at 23, and I honestly, like, I'm an impulsive person, and I'm uh, especially over time, I become more risk savvy. I'm fine with taking risks, and I bought, a few acres with a house and a trailer on it. Um, and I've like developed in a year a really solid group of friends in the Catholic and Orthodox community here. Um, and it's like I wouldn't have done that if I didn't feel like like well, one, nobody else is doing that, and two, I it's like uh I don't know what the fuck I'm gonna do if I don't have that in the first place. Because like you said about yourself, I should be like, I don't know. I it, I should be like a school teacher or something. Like I'm not a very well organized get shit done person, but I just don't see people doing it. So it's like, okay, fuck, I'll try something. And even then it's like, dude, I don't know where to start.
Yeah,
You always
guys
hope
like
there's gonna be
me, we're
guidance. You
supposed
hope
to be
there's
like
gonna be a guidebook. Sorry, yeah.
no, so guys like me, we're supposed to be like wandering tech samurais.
Yeah.
Like a samurai, but like, a cyber samurai type guy. That's what I should be in a world that made any fucking sense.
Yes. Um, um, do you think Canada is like? Well, are there any other thoughts about that? Oh, but yeah, it's like there is a lot of shit happening. I specifically see. I guess I'm more, and I'm trying more so to be in tune with like what are the Catholics doing as a Catholic, but like Catholics are doing. I'm not a. That's the thing I'm least bearish on. Even though I get told by trads that I should be, but um, I there's like Catholic distributist communities that aren't like bullshit that are propping up. And at first it's going to fail, I think, in a way, because there's a lot of rich people who are in it. And it's like, you can't just like, rich people just can't be, all the Catholic institutions just can't be like the rich hoity toity people who don't know how to turn a wrench on shit. But it's happening. People are moving based on like, I want to be at a traditional at mass type stuff. And it's like, that's cool. I have a couple who recently married. They're younger than me. I'm 24, and they moved here because they're like, why not? Let's do it. They want to get the hell out of the city they were in. It's like among young people, it's just like we just know we're fucked if we don't even try something. And if we try and fail, it's like, well, cool, whatever.
No, I agree.
Well,
And this is
yeah,
the age when you should be doing this because I'm an old head. I'm in my 30s. And once you get to your 30s, you start, when I was in my 20s, I could just sleep on a floor.
yeah,
I bet you could right now go sleep on a floor if you wanted to. Now, unless I've silk pillowcases, I want to blow my fucking brains out. It'll happen to
yeah,
you, by the way.
yeah,
So
yeah.
now
No,
this,
I'm already starting to feel it. Yeah,
yeah, 20s is when you should try stuff because, and not sound too morbid, but uh, I've always did this when I
okay.
was younger too, thinking about when I get older, when I'm unable to do things. It's stuff like this that you're going to look back on and be happy that you did. And you like it might seem frivolous now, but no, seriously, like, you're gonna love that you did this when you're 65, even if it failed.
Yeah. Um, I'm curious about Canada, but something that came to mind that I think is like the thing is beyond all the issues in the world. It's like, oh, is World War III going to break out? What's going to happen with this geopolitical problem? What's going to happen with this domestic political problem? Immigration, drugs, crime, cities falling apart, infrastructure, tech, is all kinds of shit. What's going to happen? I think everything sits upon one issue, and everything ties back to like God, but that's like we can kind of get that. The thing that's we see, well, kind of don't see, that everything runs on, that is the cause of everything, is usury. Everything runs on usury. The degenerate lifestyles that we have, the reason cities are shitty, the reason government is corrupt, is like this giant machine of interest bearing financial instruments. It's like that's how people have their retirement. That's what everything's tied to. And I think when that when the chickens have to come home to roost because the only way usury can be maintained is through perpetual GDP increase. We've already reached like diminishing returns on it. Lacey Hunt has done great research on that with the marginal revenue product of debt, which he basically says like debt does not create value anymore. It just doesn't.
Yep.
And our economy really seems to start. It seems to be reflecting more of like a medieval economy where you already have your serfs and you have your lords, and it's just horrible. It's like the shitty version of that, and it's like, okay, well, as this is shit, like in this week, I've seen like 3 videos of young women who are realizing that they shouldn't have gone to college, and everyone's like shitting on them, and I'm like, what is your problem? Women shouldn't be thinking about this. Like, it's not their fault. We did this to them. They have debt now, and it's like we should get rid of it. Like everything should kind of be set to like do what we always did, Jubilee, but we don't. It's like this forever like degrading down via usury. And I think that when that finally ends, which I think will be in 2 places, which is like medical debt, which is people aren't already paying, which again is going to be a Zoomer and millennial thing where it's only these old morons who subscribe to like libertarian economics who are like, oh, you need to pay, like, I'm not paying for your college. I'm not paying for this. I'm not paying for that. It's like, you live in a fucking society, dude. Like, if you want shit to work properly, you pay your fucking fair share. Like, you do your part. That's why we're here. That's what a society is. And like, there's this the worst thing about the Republicans, the worst thing about conservatives is like this I'm my own man type of shit. And that's why everything really is shitty. That is the worst thing. Libs are second, I think, to that problem, because that is where white people, where conservative America, what have they done for 70 years? They run the fuck away. They run away from every problem, and then they sit around and say, "Oh, well, you're not going to come for me." It's like, fuck, you idiot. The cities are gone because you left them, you moron. Like,
yeah, and there's a lot.
The Puritans ran west, and all the Italians and Irish took over their cities. And now it's happening with Indians taking over their corporations and hiring other Indians and running things like shit. It's like, you have to realize that you have skin in the game and shit needs to work properly. And we're gonna have to abandon this like I'm my own man libertarian shit. Which, by the way, just check like the early life on every single libertarian economist going back to Mises. Just look at their early life. Just look at it. Let's go to Wikipedia.
You mean what school did they go to? That's what you mean, right? I know. I'm just joking. I'm being a little silly goose, but there's a lot to unpack there. And I noticed one comment here from New Gloff who makes a good point. And I don't want to be misinterpreted as saying that I'm advocating for people decoupling from society, or that people who buy land should do it in the interest of doing exactly what you were saying, which is like, I'm going to flee. And really the line that we come back to, and a lot of people, especially now, have figured this out. It's that they say for a long time, they're saying, I just want to be left alone. Well, you'll never be left alone. That is not an option. And that used to be a bit more popular, especially with the Ted Kaczynski crowd, who, as a man, I speak as a man, a white guy. Deep down, we only have 2 wishes, most of us. One is to own a boat, and 2 is to live alone in the woods with a dog. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just, that's the dream. But at the end of the day, we understand that, and I think this is the talking point broadly on the right now. It's about creating parallel communities. It's about creating there's more people talking about settling in towns and creating some kind of sovereign state, even on a small level. I think that's where that's where their minds are at right now, which is correct. But you mentioned a lot there. I think I lost my train of thought. What were you talking about? You said libertarians.
I guess I was really the locus of it. Out of the ramble is just like usury is your problem.
Oh yeah, usury. Okay, yeah, that's a big one. Okay,
in the bud. I don't know.
I know what I was going to say. So on our show recently, we had an arc on modern MMT, modern monetary theory, which Sorry,
I
what?
think I know that fucker. I don't like him.
Well, it's
No, go ahead.
it was kind of not pioneered, but its biggest advocate would be Warren Mosler. And there's kind of like a debate between myself and my co-host Judas. For the record, I'm not pro MMT. It was more saying this is how society seems to be functioning right now. There's also a guy named Richard Duncan who wrote a book called Money Revolution. Basically, it's describing what people already have intuited, even if they're not into economics, which is that money is effectively fake. And COVID really proved this, that they created something to the tune of 3.9 trillion dollars in just influx of capital into the economy, just without a vote. They did it within a week. An insane amount of money flooded given to businesses, given to individuals, just blown all over the place. And the argument of the book is that, well, we are in a paradigm right now, and it started with the decoupling of money from the gold standard and the creation of what we describe as fiat currency. The idea that everything is controlled by the Federal Reserve, and so there's this idea. And just to bring this back to the libertarian is usually an old white guy who is trying to articulate something he's not allowed to articulate by saying, I don't want to give money to all these lazy people. What they really want to say is brown people. What they want to say is black people. They can't. And so they try and craft an ideology around that no one should be forced to do anything for anyone. What they really want to say is, I don't want it to go to these types of people that I see every day, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. But you had said that, you live in a society, you live in this advanced society where you pay taxes. But here's the thing, within modern monetary theory, the interesting thing is that taxes don't actually pay for anything. Not really.
Exactly.
Money is just created by the Fed, and it's altered electronically. Taxes, and this is where libertarians are actually correct in this model. Taxes are literally just a way to control consumer spending. You increase taxes when you want people to spend less on something, or to increase productivity, or you lower it when you want them to do something. It's not like I need the money from the people to pay for this. They can pay for whatever the fuck they want. Now, here's the funny thing, that the people like AOC and the Democrats will say that and say, oh, we can give infinite money and reparations to black people. Within MMT, what they say is that it's usually done through credit. The Fed creates credit. They don't create dollars. They create credit. Credit goes to the banks. Banks give it out in loans. So the idea is that, as long as the capital is allocated to productive resources like companies or certain sectors, and the sectors that I'm giving a big MMT summary here, but he said we could keep doing this forever if we open the spigots, the credit spigots, over quantum computing, renewable energy, AI. There's a few others like rare materials, space, stuff like that. A lot of the stuff you hear talked about right now, they're like, well, we could grow forever. And there's this manifesto that was released recently called the Techno Optimist Manifesto, written by Mark Anderson, advocating for this. Here's what they won't tell you, though. They will say infinite growth is possible in a sense, but it's more accurate to say infinite growth is required, because within MMT, you must keep growing the GDP by something to the tune of 2.5% a year. Otherwise, everything blows the fuck up and everyone dies. Mm-hmm. Like, the system needs to keep growing. It's not like you can keep growing. It must keep growing. Otherwise, you get what happened in 2008. The moment it starts to shake, the entire thing collapses. So that's where I think the techno-optimists are a bit too optimistic. Point being that within modern monetary theory, what I'm saying is that is kind of how it works right now. And the problem is, and it's like hypercharged usury, to go back to your main point. This is usury taken to its fucking extreme, that not only do you need to borrow money to do anything in society only exists if you borrow money and dump it into the banks and loans upon loans upon loans. So in this model, you can't even remove yourself from the system. That's the unfortunate part. And the problem is that, even the people who believe in modern monetary theory, even if you're skeptical about it, it kind of has to collapse. It's like, because I don't know where you start pulling the thread to unwork it. Same thing with usury. Like, at this point, unless you're living in something like an Amish community, it's like, I don't even know how you rebel against usury. It's almost like this is where the accelerationism comes from. This is why there's so many accelerationists on our side, which is like, you know what? crank the gas until this thing blows up, and that's the ultimate black pilled ideology. But once you start investigating this stuff, you're like, damn, well, where would I even start to rebel against this? It kind of has to just blow up, I guess. But that's going to be ugly. That's going to be like, the Great Depression times 50. People don't really know what a desperate people do. Like, yeah, like selling your kids for prostitution and then meat. That's where that goes. Like imagine.
Yes.
Just consider the dystopia that will befall humanity if everything collapses like that. But anyway, not to lead down a too dark a path, but that's kind of. I hope that refers to anything you said. I kind of went.
Oh no, it does, and I have a lot to go off there because I have an alternative perspective, maybe an alternative hypothesis. Do you know? He's one of my favorite. He's probably my favorite person in the tribe. Jeff Snyder. Maybe you come across him. He's known for the Eurodollar University, and I've talked about it a lot because he has a perspective that no one holds, and I think he's like a Chicago school-ish type guy. But I kind of like 2020, 2021. I was going down like from 2019 to like about when I started doing the Ourospost thing. I was like going down a money economics rabbit hole. Like I was just obsessed. And I started out like gold is real money and we're going to have hyperinflation. But then Jeff Snyder and a couple other people, forgetting their names because it's been a minute, have Santiago Capital. I forget the guy's name, but that's another one. Brent Johnson. Their point of view is the Fed actually doesn't do anything. It's the complete opposite. And I agree with this because the mechanics in which way money works is not it's not really the Federal Reserve. So the reason 2008 happened was not specifically like, oh, bad debt. It's because the financial system was built on collateralized loans that were unsecuritized. We loaned out to a bunch of people who couldn't pay their debt. And you stack that up with debt that's good. And you say, oh yeah, this is a good collateralized, what do they call it? Package, the mortgage-backed securities. And it's like, no, you can't treat that like a bond. But we did that for like 35 years. We all around the world, money or the way the financial system worked was banks, all of like people's retirement funds kind of hinged upon these mortgage-backed securities. So it's like the same debt pays for people to retire. It pays rich people a couple more percentage points than bonds, and then it all broke down. And over a weekend, you lose Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers, all because they weren't in the seats during the game of magical or musical chairs. The thing is, though, money is not created by the Fed. They can do it, it seems. Obviously, they can just loan it out or literally grant it out. The reason the economy is broken, and this is Jeff Snyder's theory, which I pretty much hold to, I think he's right, is that banks don't want to loan because they saw what happened with mortgage-backed securities. So asset-backed securities in general are seen as like, well, I know the Fed, ever since its inception, has failed at being the Fed. They always fuck up. So many banks fell apart. So many people lost their homes because the Fed just didn't want to go full socialist and bail everybody out. So what ends up happening is because there's like this, I'm afraid to loan, and the Keynesian economics shit doesn't work because the reserve requirement ratio, which it's like you just talked about this, like they give them credit. No, they really don't. Banks can create bank deposits based on nothing. That's just how it is. I mean, there's regulation, but it's kind of like they can just loan. They have a thing called central bank reserves that they loan off of, but they don't need those. They need bonds because they don't trust anything else. bonds can only go bad if the if the U.S. government collapses, which it's like, if that happens, the world, every other government can collapse, not the U.S., because we have gold, and not gold, but the gold is the bonds, the treasuries. There's no way that those can collapse. And so all banks, every single economy in the world except China and America have been doing horribly ever since 2008. You look at any GDP chart, you look at how people are doing in any European nation, any Asian nation, except like maybe Vietnam, China. Look at fucking Japan back from early 90s to now. It's all shit. It's all horrible. And no one can buy houses. No one has kids. Everyone's financially fucked. So what happens now that debt isn't creating value? Well, the Federal Reserve kind of has to become the bank, which is like Hamiltonian type shit. And I just don't know how that operates. I don't even know if that's good or bad, but I think that is going to happen in the event where it's just so bad that it's like screwed. But this is where the Turbo America thing starts to make sense, because I don't think the US can really collapse. Like the US government can live on for so long and function in a lot of ways. And you can have basically an entire Mexican ethno state within its borders, and it still functions.
Yeah,
it varies, but like,
which is what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, I basically live in it, and it's I don't have issues with it.
Yeah,
a lot of people on our side don't want to.
This is something I know a lot of people don't care for Peter Zeihan for a lot of very good reasons, especially based on what he's saying recently. But he published a book called Disunited Nations many years ago that touches on a lot of predictions about what could happen. And he makes a point, essentially what you're saying, which is that like people need to really wrap their minds around how insanely huge and important America is, and that America could withdraw a lot of its holdings globally and be fine. And in fact, what you might see in that instance, and I'm not trying to make any predictions here, but you are starting to see when they talk about onshoring or reshoring or friendshoring, bringing industries back. Well, they're mostly bringing them back to Mexico. So we're brokering a more aggressively friendly policy with Mexico and with Canada. There's I won't get it from the predictions. There's a reality in the near future where Canada literally does just become a vassal state of the U.S. objectively, because each province has a stronger trade relationship south of the border than it does between each other. I won't get into that, but you could actually see a United States of the Americas with more aggressive relationships brokered with South America as well, and then there's just this entire hemisphere is now just united and fuck the rest. Like you could see that. And America is such a lead on everyone militarily. It's not even funny, and everyone knows it. And all the posturing is what it is posturing. But even like China doesn't make sense without America as a sink for its manufactured goods. Exactly. Like I don't want to get off on a whole, trade thing.
No, you can.
Yeah, but like I will increase the likelihood of me just misspeaking as well, because I'm trying to run through. We talked about this a lot on the show, and I don't want to give the wrong number or something, and I might. Okay. I'll speak. If I speak, it'll be in very broad strokes. But and China knows this, that it's this idea of and this is going to get me in trouble, but the idea of sort of like a multipolar answer to America doesn't really hold a lot of water to me. Just strictly economics, and this is something that, again, just to refer to Marco Popic, we can talk ideology all we want. We can talk about history, but there's certain material constraints that every revolutionary or ideologue bumps up against. And the fact is that the material constraints of China means that it fucking collapses if it doesn't have the US market. And it knows it, and it needs to figure out what it's going to do about that. And that doesn't get talked about because half of our side is saying, I hope China runs the world. First of all, you fucking don't, actually. Second of all, it won't. You want to talk imperialism? Like, I won't. That's
they are like their strategy to take over the world is to backstab everybody, and everybody fucking knows it.
Yeah,
like
everyone knows. Even China knows. Chinese people aren't cool. China's not cool. At least America's still kind of cool. At least America was. There's no Chinese cowboy who wants to be China.
Yeah. It's like ask your chat. You want to be fucking Chinese? Dude, they have you. It's like they have dog restaurants. These people like watch like children get run over by a box truck, and then the box truck will back on it to make sure they're dead. People walk by it and they're like, "Oh, okay."
But
Like
my
that's
co-host
China.
Judas lived in Hong Kong for
Mhm.
10 years. So he's the
Wild.
first guy I go to because everyone's like, oh, what do I believe? The story coming out where he's like, no, I'll tell you what stories are real. I've been to mainland China. Here's what fucking happened. And it's worse than you could imagine.
Yeah.
And then, he's also like there's a lot of stories on the right about how good North Korea secretly is because, America just lies. And he's like, no, like I've known people from North Korea, they end up in China and they're not like American agents. It's like a feudal state in most of it right now. It's not good. It's very possible for these areas to actually be bad on their own without American imperialist lies,
Yeah.
Like China is not. It's just not a place you want to fucking live.
Yeah.
And it's like they have a different conception of human life. They have a different conceptualization of honor, of honoring your word. Like think right down to how you or I would interact with another person is completely alien. And if you've ever done business with Eastern companies, you'll know this. Like you need to hire someone from there to be like, can you just make sure they don't rape me? They don't just send me a fake product just because they think it's funny to lie, to a business. Anyway.
Yes. Yeah. I think I ran out of steam on that. Well, okay. Yeah, I don't know where to go. I think that was a good talk on like really just the world is ran on usury, and it's just America is the machine that keeps it going. I think the reaction that's already happening is like materializing generation by generation slowly.
Yeah. Oh, and let me just say before I forget, and this just to cycle back to what we were talking about before, I always try and keep in view what are we telling people to do. So what we just described about Turbo America, the way international trade works and is reliant on America. We talked about accelerationism. It's like, okay, but what do you tell the young person like yourself who wants like, do I buy land? What do I do? So I really do think the answer is something akin to what you're doing, which is building these parallel networks and societies. And that does not mean just be Amish. That does not necessarily mean like let's just go start a bunch of farms. It's like
a loser mentality right there.
Yeah, all the stuff we talk, a lot of the debates we get into on the right is because we actually don't just have a goal or a momentum. Not everyone, and we are getting there, but a lot of us we just don't know what to do. But we need like a project or an action plan, and once you have that, you can actually start. A lot of these little petty grievances sort of fall away. So when I say create a parallel system or society, that's kind of what people are doing right now. You probably have an affinity network of a few different people. And that's actually, what I recommend young guys do.
Yeah.
Young men for like the Zoomers and the Gen Alphas. And this will sound like an old man thing to say, but this is kind of how I did it. I didn't really get aggressively into this sort of politics until I was, in my late 20s, early 30s. I spent my 20s trying to gain experience, finding a crew of guys, the best friends that you can trust and rely on. Some guys do that through the military. Some guys do that through work. Some guys just do it with their friends. I think that's more essential to surviving long term than like going online as a young guy and trying to find a revolution to join. I think if you're a guy and you could find like a group of people that you can rely on, like 5 to 7 guys, and you can find them online as long as you're like really, really close, you can kind of do anything. You can build a house. You can take over a fort. You can do anything with 5 to 7 guys, in my opinion. That sounds like a glib statement, but it's true. And I think there's a lot of young guys who are just shopping around for the revolutionary struggle to join. And that's what gets them into trouble. And that's what has guys joining personality cults. So what I say is like, if you can get that grounding, if you can get some experience, build some skills, irrespective of whatever the political struggle is, you'll have a better chance of building this sort of self-sustaining life. And then you can group up with other guys and start saying, maybe we start some businesses, maybe. And a lot of these projects are already being done right now. Like on our side, there's a lot of like hush hush secret stuff about support networks. Homeschooling networks are a great example of this, done every single day.
Yeah,
But this
this is
stuff,
blown up everywhere. Yeah.
yeah, this stuff is possible, if you approach it realistically and if you have a good head on your shoulders and don't just, and you'll find it's easier to not become so black pilled, as we call it, or depressed. So that is just to say there is hope for people, I believe, in this, as long as you start thinking practically. One example, I'm just going to give an example. My wife was telling me today, they, and I don't know if this is true, but my wife did tell me this, so I believe it. That the government of Canada just approved something to the tune of a $3 billion grant payments scheme to just give Aboriginal people like $40,000 each, in the interest of putting to bed all this. The kids who are supposed to have died in the residential schools here in Canada, of which none were found. None were fucking
Yeah. It was
found.
all bullshit.
It was
Yeah.
literally all bullshit, but then still they're getting $40,000 on top of the money they already get, because they already get a lot of free money. Not all of them, but a lot of these different tribal bands just get payments. So then, she's dejected. She's like, that's crazy. That's crazy. My mind's thinking, yes, it is crazy. Okay, but that's what the conservatives will say. It's crazy. That shouldn't be allowed. But what do we do? Okay, but what do we do about it? Because we have to assume nothing is going to happen. I'm like, well, what we would need to do to solve this, to stop the wheels turning, would be creating some kind of advocacy group of like 3 to 5 people. I'm using the model of the Canada Anti-Hate Network. The Canada Anti-Hate Network is like our version of the SPLC, and it's like 3 guys in a shared office somewhere, but they can get the ear of any media organization in the country and gin up whatever false narrative they have. I'm like, like you would act to fix this, you would need 3 to 5 dedicated people with funding, with financing, sitting in a room, emailing, picking up the phone, and basically trying to shove the story out there that these Aboriginal groups are corrupt liars. That is what you would need. Now that sounds like a lot of work, but I'm like, but at least that's a goal. And that's, the other hand is like, well, I don't like $40 billion, going to these people. Well, I guess then society should just collapse. I'm like, okay, well, before we pick accelerationism, are there any projects that perhaps in the short term could address things like that? And it's not going to be one project that solves everything. That's the other thing. Everyone's looking for one leader, one party, one project that can fix modernity. You're going to need 45 separate projects, and each one of those is going to be a different thing. Like the whole transgender problem, that's its own thing. And then there's like the abortion problem. That's another thing. Like all of these, there's not one problem. There's a myriad of problems, and each one of those needs like a group where that's their thing that they just do. But that once you attach a dollar amount to it, once you attach an end state, well, then you can wrap your head around it. Then society doesn't really need to collapse necessarily. It's a complicated problem, but once you know the parts of the problem, you can devise a solution for it. Anyway, I hope that was helpful in some sense.
Ontologically, I'm not even against like handing black people or Indians or anybody $40,000. I'm like, dude, take it, do it. And you know what? If you fail the one drop rule, go get your money. But what I think is important about this is to, like, Republicans will come out to every single mainstream, even like the accepted underground, like Tucker and Alex Jones. They'll come at it in a way like, oh, this is well, actually, Tucker would probably be pretty cool about this. It'd be like, oh, this goes against the meritocracy and capitalism that America's built on, and you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Really, it's like, no. What you need to do here is be like, look, the everything is so bullshit and fake now that we could just feasibly do this. We didn't give people, black people, what was it, 100 acres and a mule or something like that. Do it. Like, fucking watch it happen. I'm not accelerationist. What I think is just, if you're already in this spot, gringos need to realize that, okay, now you do it. You need to realize that, like, okay, we are all working. A lot of like DR niggas are like working bullshit jobs and they hate it. They're working for like a shitty company that's not based or red pilled. and they're all beta cuck. They're all beta cucks. But like, the thing is it's so bad, dude. Why do you do this to yourself? Like, why do you keep? Why are you not like? Why are you so afraid to just jump into the water and go try to start a business, or at least work with other people to like, you know, say you go work for a company that's already like, you know, in the South, it's conservative. Maybe it's like a blue collar, gray collar type company. Well, just you're already working for it. Invite your buddies into it. Get as many guys into it as possible. Make it based. Like, make it so that you don't have to watch your language at work about what you're saying, and you can, while you're working on shit, you can scheme and have a good time and be like, oh, well, this march is happening in our town, or they're doing this at this place. We need to call up some council people. You know, we need to go blare sirens so that doesn't happen. We need to go like block the road so this shit doesn't happen.
Just to your point, you had made a point earlier about, you know, the meritocracy and whatnot. You know, it wasn't the image of the tycoon that founded America. You founded America. It was alcoholics with guns who hated condoms. That's who founded America and made America great. That could be you. I bet that describes a lot of people listening.
Yeah. No shit. It's like fuck, you know Charlemagne, right?
Yeah.
Charlie's awesome, dude. I remember a while ago when like a certain election a few years ago where the big man lost. He was just making a point, like, all you need is like, you don't need like even 1% of America. All you need is like 100 guys to just like walk into the White House. Like, this happens in every country. Not that this shouldn't happen, and it probably would be really silly and crazy. But like, the point is every single time this has happened in history, it like works in insane ways. It's just like, I'm in charge now. Hey,
Yeah.
what's up? I'm in charge now. There is like this this deep black pill of like, you shouldn't do anything with power. You should be afraid to like mention your name or your you need to we need to be eternally anonymous, which is like, okay, that's good. So a lot of people need to do that. You need behind the scenes guys, you know, but you need your front men. You need guys who are not afraid, and you need to like you don't even like make noise like the fucking, like, you know, these far right dudes have been doing for decades. Don't be goofy about it. Just like, realize that you need to take that risk of, I need to have my own institution because I'm so sick of working at this job that sucks, and I want to be able to like imagine if Catholics just came together and like a bishop just said, okay, Catholics, don't work a job where you have to work on Sunday. And if all Catholics in America just need to, or in this diocese, need to just demand that, no, I'm not working Sunday. And, you know, that's going to happen more and more because the labor problem is so fucking bad, especially in blue collar jobs. Just start using your leverage, because if you're a good employee, you know, you're on time and you're fucking good, use your leverage to make your company not shitty and, you know.
Yeah. And let me just say this
LGBT.
before I forget. And for people listening, the leverage shouldn't just be removing yourself from the company, because I'd heard some people, you know, we'll start from the position of, especially white guys, you know, that's kind of who we are implying with this. You have a lot of power if you collectivize, if you speak with a voice. I'm going to sound like one of these damn commies, but it's true. But every time I see that articulated, it's usually in the interest of, yeah, and if you quit your job, that'll show them. And that's what I don't like. That's the same problem as like, just leave the cities or leave everything and they'll miss you when they're gone. They won't miss you when you're gone. Everything will get worse and then you'll be stuck with it. So, like, to your point, which is like, realize the leverage that you could possess, but don't use that leverage to remove yourself from the conversation or leave the company and hope that it falls apart, or leave society and hope it falls apart. Use that to actually advocate for something within the organization. And I think that, you know, when we talk about the problems of modernity, however we want to describe it, they're usually, like I said, 45 different problems. And it can make your mind spin once you can start thinking about them. Like, one is the biological crisis of, you know, mass immigration. There's the stuff people forget, that, you know, there's plastic in your blood too. That testosterone is dropping. That's a big one. Sometimes we forget that that's happening. There's not a lot of political answers for that. That's just a fucking insane thing that we deal with. Another one, and there's a bunch I could go through, but the one I'll talk about is the competency crisis. That's something that a lot of people have remarked upon, and it's we're deciding whether it's good or bad. The position I'm going to take right now is that the competency crisis reveals a lot of opportunities and windows for people. The fact that if your oppressors are very stupid and the organization is hollow, every time, like you were saying about or Charlemagne's point about, showing up with 100 guys, you might enter those hallowed halls and think, oh my God, this system is so big. Then you see Mitch McConnell's brain melt out of his fucking skull on live TV, and you realize, wow, half these people are losing their minds.
Yeah.
Congress people are 950 years old and they don't know what's going on. And that won't happen forever. Like, that won't last forever. But there seems that in certain areas of society, it's just full of the dumbest or dyingest people you can imagine. So I look at that, and again, back to the project, thinking of like, well, what can we do about that? Does the competency crisis mean that we could put some pressure on certain areas? We talk about, oh, in the future, the military is all going to be like black lesbians. It's like, okay, sure. What does that mean for us? What can we do with that? Is there something we can do in the interest of doing something over here? Anyway, that's just questions people can ask themselves instead of getting too defeatist. The competency crisis could present opportunities for driven groups or, collectivized parallel societies.
Yeah. Yeah. I know a young guy. Oh, I think he just graduated. I am kind of, well, one that I will say the competency crisis, and I've just experienced this my entire adulthood in blue collar jobs, is old dogs they're not really interested in carrying on their skills to younger people, and they kind of see young dogs as like, one, morons, and then two, like we're incompetent in our blood and we just can't learn, and they always want to jump on shit and do stuff for themselves, and so that's really not entirely their fault. It's like the 90s, and I had this when I was young, but it fell off. Like, I had I had my mom was kind of a helicopter mom when I was a kid, up until probably about 11, 12, and that kind of went away. Like, the 90s to the 2000s was just this era of like everyone born during that time was just like sequestered off to go play video games or stay within like 1/10 of a square mile.
Yeah.
So
Hey,
they don't
my
get
mom was
abducted.
a helicopter mom too. The helicopter
Mhm.
from the start of Apocalypse Now.
But it's like, you can't, in one way you can't blame these young guys, but two, I kind of see like Judas, he's brought up the Fourth Turning book, which I do love that book. It's kind of like a meme book, but it's a good book. When you read it, you kind of see things a little differently, and it's helpful. But there's nothing I can say about it that hasn't already been said, really. But where was I going with that? Fuck.
Well, I'll say just on the I actually haven't read
Yes.
The Fourth Turning, so I'm just gonna. I know
Mhm.
he's talked about it. One thing that it reminds me of, it's described. I think it's called the hysteroidal cycle, where it's like strong men create good times create weak men create bad times create
Yeah.
strong men. Yeah, that'll cycle. My fear, and this is just to circle back to the Turbo America thing. My fear is that a lot of the accelerationists and people who hope that things collapse or get worse, like, well, that'll create strong men. Not always. You could have collapse scenarios where the men just stay weak forever.
Yeah,
Like, that actually happens
or they
more
just
frequently in history.
or they just become like, retarded murderers. I mean, like,
Yeah.
a collapse. Actually, a really good book to read is A Collapse of Complex Societies, by Joseph A. Tainter. Ha ha ha. And he talked about, and you mentioned this, is kind of like the alliance thing between all these DR dudes. But every time in history where there's like a giant problem, like giant empire, he uses a great example that I go back to all the time, is the alliance at Monte Alban and the city state empire of Teotihuacan in Mexico. which this I think would have been around like 700 AD, 600 AD. And what happened was this giant empire, in terms of like infrastructure and just quality, but it's still really just a city state, which is pretty good for you know Mexico in the 600s or whatever. It was called Teotihuacan, and they could literally conscript tens of thousands of men to go like build something. Like they were powerful, and all these other small tribes who were dumber than them were like, we have to ally, and we hate each other, but we have to ally and either like fight back or just wait. And that's what they did. They waited like 50 years, and Teotihuacan just got too complex too fast, and they collapsed because they couldn't maintain that massive amount of consumption, and then also have the production to meet that demand, which is like a very real thing happening. The thing I was going to bring up about Fourth Turning is they bring one of my favorite parts is they bring up the silent generation, and interestingly enough, like there's like 4 generations in each secular cycle, as they call it, and it's like about 80 years long, the entire duration. And the silent generation was the crisis generation. And what's interesting is they have statistics showing how the silent generation were the first generation in history, and even up to now, that when they were asked, only like 5%, when they were asked, do you want to start a business? Do you want to do all this? Do you want to like, get a lot of money? The silent generation was like, no, I don't want a nice car. I don't want, I'm not a big balls motherfucker. I just want to feed my kids. I just want a good job. I want a good union job to feed my kids. And then you get to the boomers, and it's complete opposite. And what I see with like Generation Z being the crisis generation of now, not that I stand by this book in an orthodox sense, because it's not entirely accurate, especially now that America is not really an Anglo country, but the Generation Z is probably going to have this similar issue where they're just like, I just want the trains to run on time, and I don't care about these sad little narratives that people try to feed to me. I just want shit to work, and I want to be able to spend time with whatever friends or family I have. I'm tired of seeing trannies walking the streets and people getting killed over drugs. I'm so sick of it. I'm done. Just please put these, just like, one thing that I've talked about is like one of these weird things. And if it happened, like I remember Trump mentioned something like this a few months ago, which if he did this, if anybody did this, it would be epic. It's just, we need to just go Pinochet on the drug problem. Don't do what we did for 40 years. Just literally, if you find drug dealers, just kill them. Like, kill drug dealers, any drug smugglers, you find them, you find their stations, line them up. And it's like, that is going to fix your drug problem. And it's everywhere. It's disgusting. And it's just, your rot continues to, and I think this generation is just going to be so beaten down by how shitty it is. They're like, the silent generation had a similar thing. Like, a lot of the guys who made it out of the silent generation, all the stories you hear about him, like your grandpa, who was like always quiet and always just like around the house working, working on a shed. You ask him a question, he was always a one-word answer. Those guys, they probably like killed somebody at some point to like get food for their family, and they didn't, and they just don't tell anybody, and they just have to live with that shit. It's stuff like that. And Gen Z is like, they're kind of going through the same bout, but they're not like tough men.
Well, also consider, this is where I empathize, especially with Gen Z, but also millennials too, which is, let's refer to the silent generation where they said, all I want to do is feed my kids. Well, if you ask that to the Gen Z, it's like, all I want to do is feed my kids, but there's plastic in the food too. So I guess we need to solve the food issue. And it's like, I want to be able to pay my house. Well, I can't get a house. And then in terms of my kids, well, the entire legal apparatus is aligned against me so that my wife can take my kids. So like, once you're on the ground there, you're like, what do you actually want? Well, I want to change every single aspect of society by 30%, which is actually what you need to do. So that's the true nihilism, I think, that is being experienced. A nihilism that is not experienced by older generations, which is like, oh yeah, all that stuff you went through, but remember that the government is trying to kill you, and it is watching you right now. And I think an interesting marker of that is, and this will be just a recent phenomenon, but if you track memes, and I'm old enough to remember this, I remember when memes used to be just a tiny bit depressing. The types of memes that young people get now are just about how they're schizophrenic and want to kill themselves, and that's
Yeah.
hilarious. And that, like, everyone will say, like, it's so much worse now for young people because the only thing we commiserate over is being insane and suicidal, and then we laugh about it. You know what I mean? So, but if you show the types of memes that are circulating, even in kind of leftist circles, to an older person, it'll break their fucking mind. Because also, I remember, I remind people this is like their big trauma of these generations was nuclear war. We're starting from a place of nuclear war. The risk has not gone down of nuclear war. We've accepted that, and things got worse. So start from saying, oh yeah, we can die in nuclear hellfire, but then also my balls are about to fall off, and my kids are going to be stolen by the state and their genitals mutilated if I do the wrong internet search. Like shit like that. That's mind bending. So most of these kids will be like, what do you want? I would love to be able to at least die with a house. I know I can't have a house right now, but maybe one day I can have a house before I die. Like there's and they're being denied that, and that's the problem. And I don't know if that's getting better. So to your main point, their capacity to accept violence will be a lot more wide open than people believe. Like they're not going to give a shit. Like we already see massacres and we don't care. Like you're not going to shake these young people. If you see, like, the main complaint about January 6th is that nobody important died. That's what people wanted to fucking see, by the way. So, I probably shouldn't be saying that on YouTube, but
No,
fuck, we said that on our podcast. It's like the only complaint about January 6th is we always give the example when you're punching someone in the head, you need to conceptualize in your own mind yourself punching through their skull. And that didn't conceptualize punching through the skull. And I'll just leave it at that. Anyway.
yeah, the thing is like and like I'm allergic to the concept of revolution. I wrote a little Substack dealio called Revolution is a Spirit. And I framed it in the same way, like the way, like, once people start drinking and one person starts drinking more and another person does, and before you know it, within a couple hours, people are shit faced. And it's like it's a spirit. It's in the air. It's in the vibe. It's in the room that it just starts happening. Revolution is like this demonic thing, in my opinion, where it's just like it's a thing that really shouldn't happen. It's always like we really should desire just proper order. It would be nice if America could function and just exist properly, and I want to see that. I have no, like, I'm on the deep state side when I see like right wing dudes become these giant Russophiles, and they're like, oh dude, Russia's gonna make the West base and they need to take over everything. Like, dude, you are being played by like bots. Like you're being played by foreign disinformation. You shouldn't want that. You should want your country to function. That's like another big beef I have, just seeing it. Like, dude, I mean, one, you shouldn't have opinions about these fucking Slavs. Like, that's their deal. And regardless of if the CIA caused something or not, they cause everything, whatever, fine. But like, you should still want that to function. And
Let me just say this: I try and move carefully when I make these because there's a lot of people in our space that are hostile to these sorts of discussions. But my position is that there's a creeping threat of third worldism within this thing called the dissident right. I think a lot of people need to be very third worldism. It could also be known as Duginism. Alexander Dugin is very interesting, not a stupid man, very a good philosopher, but he is spearheading this internationalist movement against the West, against the imperial. So a lot of it kind of emerges from very familiar communist thinking, which is that the third world needs to rise up and topple the imperialist West. So if you ever heard the term Atlanticist, that's where this comes from. So you're anti-America, but also Britain, and you have the Atlantic Empire. So there's a lot of money flowing in from third worldists. And this is where anytime you hear someone say, again, we got into trouble with this on the show recently, where I was saying, with the Israel versus Palestine, I'm like, I'm no fan of Israel, but I'm like, I will stop short of calling like the Muslim independence movement my brothers in a common struggle, because I'm aware that a lot of these Muslim or Arab movements kind of group me in with the Jews. Like they don't like white people either. Or saying that, oh, the struggle of North Korea is our struggle. Those are our brothers. Like seeing any third worldist independent struggle as your own, especially if you're a white nationalist. I don't hate that, but there's a lot of propaganda coming into our space from that sector to turn white people against their own self-interests. And I could spend like an hour going on this, but I'm going to try and summarize it by saying that I think if you can teach white people how to advocate for their self-interest, they'll stop shopping around for other ethnic groups to align with for their self-interests. And that it's pioneered by a lot of the like Dugin, which is like, he's not your friend. Like he hates, he's not like a friend of the West either. They would love to see the West destroyed, and I don't think they would welcome you with open arms. That's my sense from having read Dugin pretty extensively and spent time in these circles. Like, this isn't me talking shit. I've had many conversations with these individuals. I've done the reading. There's a lot of people in our space, I would say, are third worldist and are always like, let's find another foreign nationalist movement that hates us to side with, to convince them that we're the good ones. And almost all of them want America to be destroyed. That's the common thread between them. They're like, if you ever heard them call America the Great Satan, it's shit like that. And I'm like, there's something going on there. And it's hard to make that case without being labeled as a Zionist. That's the other thing. So it's like, oh, if you think that, you must be like pro-Israel. I'm like, that's almost their framing. That's the framing they want. So it's like, oh, if you don't love the Palestinian movement, that means you are a Jewish imperialist. That's a strange way of looking at it, but I've been accused of that by these types of people. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent. I'm trying to use my words carefully.
I really hate anti-Semitics and anti-Zionists. We're fully in support of Israel here, and I just want to make that clear to anybody who's listening.
Yeah, like to me, it's like you can have a nuanced discussion about this sort of stuff instead of being
trying to clear shit up so this stays on YouTube. Sorry.
Yeah, like good guys versus bad guys, and that's sort of like the Marvelification of it. And I'm like, we should be better than that, at least. Anyway, I know I'm going to get a lot of hate comments for that, but I'm like, just be aware that. Anyway, I'll repeat myself if I just keep going, so we could.
Yeah. Okay. I live in the country, so I can go pee right outside this door here. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to ask you a question. I'll be listening to you. What do you? What is? And maybe I don't know. I'm sure you could go off on this, but like, is there seems to be like this unanimous. The WASP needs to return to like power, like we restoring this. Like, I think that's one of the most. Other than the third worldists seem to be mostly, at least when I see it on like Twitter, is like Mexicans, but the restoration of the WASP seems to be like the go-to goal, so that America is like, you restore identity, those guys will do things properly. Do you see, is that even feasible, and is that desirable?
Yeah, I think it is. And there's some guys I know who advocate for that. I think you probably know them, the Old Glory Club. They're very into that sort of thinking, and I do agree with it. I have nothing against the WASP. I think they're correct in their historical context. I think they're correct in their idealism. The question is whether or not it's practical. And the people, once again, I refer to the people asking the right questions. I think the people asking the right questions are like, okay, what is it about the WASP, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, that did help create America, that helped define America, and arguably is still in control in a lot of areas? Like, there's a lot of, that's not to say that WASP power is completely dissipated. There are still WASPs. Some people would even say that they've become inverted, that maybe, they need to go away. But I think the right people asking the right questions, especially those affiliated with the Old Glory Club, are the ones saying like, okay, what about this group? Where's the magic in that group? And if it has fallen, maybe we don't try and return to how it used to be, but we want to capture the essence of that group and maybe replicate it elsewhere. Now, the problem we get, and this is where we kind of return to what we were just talking about the global state of affairs with trade, is that there are no more frontiers. So a lot of the material circumstances and a lot of the constraints that are present to us weren't present for WASP when America was founded. So it's not like we could replicate the WASP rise to power line for line. But I think they're correct in saying that what is it about, like, the idea of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant being, if not the main identity in America, is one of them. Because if you go into like American history, there's, that book American Nations and Albee and Seed are good for this, actually breaking down the genealogy of the ethnic groups that founded America. WASP is kind of one of a few, but let's just say that's like one of the main ones, especially, and became to dominate. Okay, but what about that group can survive and thrive in the 21st century, and it won't look like what survived and thrived in the previous century? But when I talk about like self-interest, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Like, okay, the self-interest of this group is survival. Now, the survival of this group might not look like colonial America, and maybe it involves like settling somewhere else. Maybe it involves conglomerating in one part of America and achieving sovereignty by numbers there, and then expanding outward. But that the question of like, do we think they still are relevant? Yes. Do we think that they can survive in the 21st century? Yes. Do I think they can achieve that status? Yes, but they probably need to be asking different questions. But I think they're still in the phase of like, okay, what is this group? Like, there's like, this is the problem that a lot of young people have that we talked about before. Like, you feel very fragmented, you feel very scattered right now. It's not obvious, if you are this type of individual, how you can go to where your people are. You're stuck in New Orleans or Atlanta or some fucking place. But I hope that's an answer to your question. It's a lot of
Yeah.
yeses, but the shape it will take will necessarily be different, because I think that group needs to go through a different sort of ethnogenesis in the 21st century, and I think it will need a new frontier. And this is where we get into kooky shit like space and stuff. But, we don't need to go down that road. But that's why our side is like the only one that are excited about going to other planets. It's like, okay, let's just do America on Mars. We'll do it again this time.
Right. Yeah.
But I know a lot of, especially the Christian people, they don't like the idea of just abandoning Earth either. So that's like, that's a hard sell, I think, especially.
Oh yeah. I'm not
Christian.
interested in any of that, but I like, if they do it, I'm just like, I mean, it space kind of embodies like vast chaos and nothing. It's like horrible. I don't know. It just seems like maybe we should do that. It's just it's like one of those things where I'm like, I'm a peasant layperson, and I'm just like, the state will do what the state does, and that's fine. Just don't make me do things that are wrong. And if you do, then I don't have to follow it. You know?
But in that techno optimist manifesto, and it's funny that I don't know if you read that manifesto, but on our Gumroad and our Patreon, I do a line for line review of that, and it's like over 2 hours long. But they have this one line in there that our children will live among the stars, and I just keep saying that space is mostly a tomb. It's not a place you want to be, and you think it's full of wonder, and it's mostly like radiation and gravity that'll turn you inside out, and then just silence, maddening silence. So like, I don't, if we're talking about going to space or another planet, it's like, you hope you land on a planet where you don't suffocate, and then maybe you just end up mysteriously irradiated. Like, it's not a fun, hopeful thing. It's at least when you went to America, you could find some fucking corn. You're not finding corn on Mars.
That's great. Well, I guess I've ran out of stuff. I don't know how long you are able to go. But
I can go a bit longer. I think we're at like an hour 23. I'm thinking maybe another 10-15 minutes. Then I got to start getting this baby of mine down to bed.
Yeah. Are you a cradle Catholic?
No. I'm a new guy.
Oh wow. What'd you, if I can ask, what'd you grow up in? What was your milieu?
Nothing. I was
same here.
Grown up pretty, not even atheist, just agnostic. My parents, I know my grandparents were Anglican, but my mother and father were not. And so it was never talked about, so that when I would I would have friends who were, Protestants or Baptists, and I would go to their church and I literally didn't know what it was. Like,
Yeah,
what's this building? It seems nice. It's got an interesting smell to it. But like, I just didn't get it. And I think later on they said like, oh, we wanted you to find out for yourself and make your own decisions. And I'm like, as I'm raising my kid, I'm like, well, give them something to go off of. Make it so they don't just wander in like, hey, who's that guy up there nailed to a cross?
exactly.
Like you just sound fucking retarded.
Yeah. Yeah, I grew up in a similar situation. My dad's side was Pentecostal, and he became an atheist. My mom was Catholic, and she became just kind of vaguely spiritual. So I grew up with like nothing. I didn't even know who Jesus Christ was really, or like any of that until I was probably like a preteen or something. Like I knew kids. Like I grew up in the South, but I was just always puzzled, and I was always like, well, uh, we don't do it, and my family is relatively functional, so I'm like, it's stupid. Um, but then it's just like, well, yeah, you kind of confront the cosmological argument, and then just like, what's your point in life? And then it kind of becomes like, oh well, scientists are like moving the goalposts and changing their literal mythological tale of history all the time, and I'm like that's weird. Why would I do that with truth? Like truth
Yeah.
has to be an objectively solid thing, you know?
What's interesting is that, again, as someone in their 30s, I was coming up in the age of like peak atheism,
Yeah.
atheism as pop culture, atheism. Like, there's the online atheist versus Christianity movement, but even prior to that, you had your Marilyn Manson's. Like, this was the golden era of ripping pages out of the Bible on stage.
Yep.
So it was cool to rebel against Christianity, even if you had no strong feelings about it. And I'm not sure that's the case anymore. I'm an old head, so I don't have my finger too far on the pulse of the culture, but I don't see that like rebelling against Christianity as objectively if I did. So maybe that has something to do with more people are comfortable with it, but also you don't see it represented in the media, because also when I was growing up, if you didn't go to church, you watched The Simpsons, and The Simpsons went to church, so you knew what it was. But
Yeah.
if you don't see it, if you're not brought into that world and you don't see it in the culture, you almost have no initiation into what this thing is. And that's just, I don't know what that's like for young people. I think that's a completely different experience than what I had.
Did you have like a rebellious phase at all?
Oh yeah, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, me too.
Like,
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
a piece. I mean, I was suspended from school like 4 times.
Yeah.
I was also, my father passed when I was pretty young. And so
My
that
mom passed
tent,
when I was young too.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that I don't want to get off like a whole psychoanalytic thing, but I do find
Yeah.
a close family member passing when you're young, especially if you're a man, kind of kicks you off into just rebellion in every direction. So like, I spent most of my teens and 20s into the drugs, into the sex, into the just wanton destruction. Looking back, I was just being an insane person. Getting into like, I won't go into too much detail, but let's just say crime and things like that,
Yeah.
gang
Yeah.
stuff and what have you. Obviously not anymore, but yeah, I think that had a big impact of it. I think a lot of people probably have something similar going on, and I can only imagine with divorce rates going up, there will be something analogous to that as well. Like, young people just more than ever before lacking family structure that seems coherent. Yeah, again, I can only imagine what it's like. I would assume my experience is widely held.
Yeah. What I've noticed with like, um, I do like living in a culturally Catholic area, having coming from like a more the Baptist area of Texas, the Bible church area. I've now live in a very Catholic area because it's friggin' ethnically Catholic. Um, but when you kind of confront people's their values, eh, ranging in intelligence, there's always like there is like a pull to God, even with especially like dumber guys that I know who are like, for all intents and purposes, like kind of scoundrels in their life because they're just they're just blue collar, tough. They had a bad childhood or something, divorce, shit like that. But there's always like there's a pull. They know they have to believe in God because it's the thing that makes sense. Like whatever. But there's a complete chaotic approach to it that everybody has, where it's like even culturally Catholic people, even though I think are more, they kind of get it more than I've noticed with Prots, because I've been in the Prot direction, and that is, at least in terms of the lower church, it can go insane. I mean, I was like house church type, Pentecostal type of stuff, and that is insane shit. What I'm getting at is there's like a chaos of people's approach to God and truth now, and everyone has their own their own approach to it. And I think that's why you get like this mass like conversion and reversion happening in Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy to this like insane degree. Like I have several IRL friends who are Eastern Orthodox converts who are all young men. Like it's
big time. That's something I've noticed too. And they'll say like,
yeah.
well, it's the least cucked. And then you're like, well,
Yeah,
is that
yeah,
the
yeah.
right framing
I
to
have
be
too many
using for something like this?
Yeah, it's stupid. You're gonna fuck up if that's your basis, which
it's like you're choosing a church for political reasons.
Yes. Yeah.
And you see that a lot of, and my priest, he knows I'm in marketing, and you know, we're very, very friendly. He's the one who baptized me. And
Nice.
he's a lot of priests are asking the same question: how do we get more people into the church? And you know, he doesn't really know my political leanings, although I've made them clear in various ways. But I'm like, well, you know what? There's a group that you want, and there's a group that you don't want. And if you actually, again, if you're talking practically, like let's say you have a problem. I want to get more people to attend church. That's what most priests see because they don't see it through the political lens. But I'm thinking, okay, I could probably find a lot of guys to fill these seats, but they would probably be the wrong types of guys for this. And I need to ask those questions. And do you want more, like, do you want very politicized? Might be kind of easy. Do you want guys who are just always switching between types of Christianity? You can find those guys. Do you want people to join the church for political reasons? That's a big one. Like you can probably find that, but you might not want those guys because they'll leave again for Eastern Orthodoxy because they're looking for who's going to tell them when the Holy War is starting. And maybe that's not maybe that group is it's more difficult to wrangle long term than no one being there. And then like, oh, we want young families. Well, that's a hard problem. That means like especially these churches, like, are there young families in the area? Well, maybe not. So then what do we do about that? Anyway, it's a complex problem, but it's one that I've actually kind of been tasked with answering, and it explodes out into complexity once you think about it.
Yeah. One thing I have noticed that like you're not going to get one thing I've really come to understand, and I think the internet, I know also a lot of people IRL and on the internet who married through some type of internet thing. Met people married through Twitter or a Discord server, and they're fine. They're good. Or dating apps. But the issue, and it's just this thing eats at me, is like these Reverend Novus Ordos and TLMs. They're full in a lot of places. They're thriving with families, but you have this issue of a lot of single men. And then you go to the more casual Novus Ordo, the more feely, and it's full of young, beautiful Catholics are the most beautiful women. The beautiful women, and it's like there's no like Mormons do better at forcing people like, hey, we are here to find a wife/husband at this event. It's not for us to be like we're here to do that. That would be more helpful. But like all I see currently, and myself is I'm included here. I'm just a little bit more like facing the issue with myself is just like you can't. There's a certain point. My friend who is a chanter at an Orthodox church here, he's like gotten kind of pissed off. He has so many of these like 20-something, 30-something dudes who become Orthodox, good guys, work jobs, good dudes, but they don't get married. They don't even try, and it's like, dude, that you can't have a sausage fest. You need to like, and it's not attracting. It attracts families, but families who are already 30-something, and it's like, it's just something needs to be done there. That is like a problem. That like I see all these young guys, a lot of them are like weird, and I get it, and they're cool. Like, come on, this is a problem. You have a bunch of converts who are men, and they have nothing to do. They have no wife. It's like
especially if they're the types of young guys
cringe.
where it's like, I don't want to have women around because that's cringe, or girls are cringe. You know, like I'm not saying that that's what they do, but I've heard guys say that, like kind of like sort of that Nick Fuentes America First type thing. It's like, yeah, you have women around, you have them around, and things go down. You can't have women in the church. I've said before. Who's got the clip? You can't have women in the church. That's just my Nick Fuentes impression. But it's like,
that's pretty good.
Yeah, but you can't. You know, at a certain point, if you're being serious, we could all have fun. We could all meme.
Yes.
But if we're being serious for a second, you're like, okay, we can't just have a bunch of dudes hanging around. Like, and we knew that since time immemorial. Like we knew, they go back to the fucking 1500s. Like, look, we just can't have these guys hanging around. Weird shit happens when there's too many guys hanging around. There's no pussy around. In so many, to put it like that.
Exactly. No, yeah, and it goes in horrible directions in many different ways. But like, yeah, it's like you're, it's cringe. You're not really taking your life. Oh yeah, like Jeremy Kubas of Contra Gentiles, he's like, or Cubas. He says Cubas. He says it the Anglified way. He's like, dude, I wouldn't have been motivated to make a bunch of money and get shit done if I didn't have a kid. Because when that happened, when you get a woman, and then it's like, that's expensive. It's just, you got to take care of her. And then you have kids. You're like, I need to be on my shit now. I just like, if you don't have anyone, you can just let shit fall apart and just have like, that's something I've noticed about myself. I'd be way, way more motivated and less of a sloth if I was just like,
let me just say this to the young guys who maybe didn't realize this. Bitches like going out to dinner like a lot. Like they're gonna want, and they want things that you're like, oh, again. Oh, you need another set of earrings. You're gonna hear this all the time. So yeah, just be aware.
They're having a sale at Bed Bath and Beyond on Saturday. I mean, you know, I know you like it's like, yeah, and you got to be prepared for that, and you know, your brain, you will start hustling. Your brain will fire off in ways, and I see it with the young guys I know who are recently married, and it's like, damn, I need some of that shit in my life. Like, it's too easy just being a single fuck up.
And honestly, like, you know, and I'm sure this will sound cucked to some people, and I do have to get going soon. Speaking of wife, because I have to get this fucking kid down. But you know, I do find, and this isn't a cope, I do find that being married has made me a better person. My wife, like knowing how I've been in my life, you know, we joke about, oh, there's a sale in Bed Bath & Beyond. I never went looking for sales when I was single.
Yeah,
I never got a sale on anything unless it was like fucking beef jerky or some shit. But if you find the right woman, not all women are great. There's a lot of duds. However, if you find the right woman, you will. A weird thing will happen. You will become more focused and cool, and that woman will become smarter because she'll just absorb all the shit that you're into. That's the cool thing about women. They're just like, you know, they don't have that sort of autistic focus on weird things. So they'll suddenly have things to talk about. It's a win-win for both sides. I'm selling marriage to young people.
Yeah. All right. That's good, bro.
I hope this is good. Show. We covered a lot of ground. Hope I didn't get you into too much trouble. We had some people in the chat asking, like, were you serious about that Israel comment?
No, not at all. All right, clear enough. No. I was actually gonna read that. I was gonna wear that shirt. I bought it before I even became a fan of your show, but it was the all boomers are the, what is it? Every boomer is the
that shirt sells so well. Considering I made that shirt very quickly. I'm like, this is a fun shirt. That's like the number one shirt that sells, which is funny because I've gone out of my way to be like, you know, I'm not one of these guys that blames boomers for everything. I'm really not.
No,
but it's ironic that we sell that shirt. I guess I'm just a hypocrite, but yeah,
you kind of got like an MDE thing going on, and I love it. And everybody should check your shit out and give you money and go on your hilarious ass website, buy your merch. You just like Contra Gentiles. your fucking show needs to be huge. You know, you're good, bro. You
Well,
and
honestly,
Judas
I
are awesome.
appreciate having you on. I'm a big fan of your stuff as well. And I've watched you on YouTube before. And this is one of the better conversations I think I've ever had. Hey, anytime you want to have me on, I'll be wherever you're at, wherever you need me. Put me in, coach.
Oh, yeah, man. All right. Good talk, bro. God bless.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
See ya.